I felt like my sister finally found someone that she loved and she could trust.
Somebody shot my wife.
It seemed that everyone that knew Pauletta wanted her dead.
The car is still running, headlights cutting through the January darkness. A woman lies face down in the driveway, 3 gunshot wounds to her head. Pauletta Burleson, 56 years old, wife of a Baptist pastor in Tyler, Texas, murdered in her own driveway. Her husband will tell police he heard nothing, saw nothing, touched nothing. One of those claims is a lie, and the bloody keys will prove it. To understand what happened, start with the crime scene on January 24, 2011. Before we begin, I'd like to ask, what are you doing right now while you listen? Working, driving, cooking, or just taking a quiet moment? Drop a comment and let me know. Your presence here truly matters. This story is based on real events and public records. Some scenes have been dramatized for storytelling, but the core facts remain true to what happened. The woman lay face down in the driveway, bleeding from the head, while headlights from a car still running illuminated her body. Pauletta Burleson lay face down in her own driveway, a hospice worker who had spent years caring for the elderly, now beyond anyone's care. Blood pooled beneath her head and neck, dark and spreading across the concrete. The engine of a car idled somewhere behind her, its headlights casting her shadow long across the pavement. Sergeant Wayne Kuhlman, a Houston homicide detective with years on Fifth Ward cases, arrived to find a scene that didn't add up. The car sat 15 feet down the driveway from where Pauletta lay, engine running, driver's door hanging open, headlights aimed at her back like stage lights on a performer who would never rise. A folding lawn chair sat near the body, collapsed but upright, positions as if someone had been sitting there moments before the shot. "She's not breathing," one of the first responders said, stepping back from the body. Kuhlman moved closer, cataloging details. Gunshot wound to the head and neck, massive blood loss. The woman lay in the position of someone who had dropped where she stood. No defensive wounds visible. No signs she tried to run or fight. The car's headlights painted everything in harsh white light, turning the blood black. "The car, it's still running," another officer noted. Kuhlman walked toward it. The driver's door stood open. Keys were missing from the ignition. No, not missing. Someone had removed them. The car had been positioned deliberately. Engine left on, door left open, aimed at the body like evidence staged for discovery. 3 details caught his attention. 3 things that didn't fit a man who claimed he'd just arrived home, the distance between the car and the victim, the lawn chair positioned near her body, and the way the headlights illuminated her like she was meant to be found exactly this way. Remember the headlights. Tracy Bernard Burleson stood at the end of the driveway in the posture of a man who had just discovered horror. A pastor claiming he'd come home to find his wife bleeding.
I have to be a man of God, man. I have to be a man of God.
Cooperative, visibly shaken, answering questions before officers could finish asking them. His hands moved when he talked, gesturing toward the body, toward the car, toward the street as if the answers were written somewhere in the air between them. "I just got home," he said, voice breaking. "I went to the store. When I pulled in, I saw her lying there." Kuhlman listened. The story was simple, linear, exactly what a man would say if he'd walked into a nightmare, or exactly what a man would say if he'd created one and needed witnesses to believe he'd only discovered it. The car engine continued running. The headlights stayed on. Pauletta Burleson's blood continued spreading across the concrete driveway of the home she'd shared with the man now explaining how he'd found her. The man standing at the end of that driveway would tell them he had just come home. Everything he said after that was built on it, but his story was already starting to crack. The camera was running, and Tracy Burleson was already talking about God, about hate, about the kind of man he needed to be. He stood in the same driveway where his wife's blood was still drying on the concrete, speaking directly into a police video camera with the fluency of a man accustomed to holding a congregation's attention. He explained his evening, went to the corner store for snacks, drove home, pulled into the driveway, saw Pauletta lying there, still breathing. Called 911, tried to help her. The story came out smooth, ordered, full of the kind of details an innocent man would remember. "That's hate, man. That's hate," he said, gesturing toward where the body had been. "To shoot someone like that?" Kuhlman stood off camera, watching. Tracy's hands moved constantly, pointing, emphasizing, shaped the air between himself and the lens as if sculpting his innocence into something visible. He talked about forgiveness, about what Scripture demanded of a believer, about the burden of being a pastor when evil walked into your own driveway. "I'm supposed to be a man of God," Tracy said, voice catching. The performance was flawless. That was the problem. A man who just found his wife shot in the head, still alive when he discovered her, dying while he called for help. That man should be incoherent with shock, not delivering a sermon on hate and grace. Then Tracy said something no one had asked about. "After I got out," he said, looking directly at the camera, "I never got back inside my vehicle." Kuhlman's attention sharpened. Got out of what vehicle? When the statement was oddly specific, volunteered without prompting, delivered with the certainty of a man establishing an alibi for a question that hadn't been asked yet. Why would anyone need to know whether he got back in his car? He said he had to forgive. He was already counting on it. Tracy kept talking, explaining how he'd tried to be strong for Pauletta, how he'd held her hand while waiting for the ambulance, how he'd prayed over her body even as the blood pooled beneath her head. The words poured out in a steady stream, filling every silence, answering questions before they could form. Then William Fuller, Tracy's 27-year-old son who suffered from sickle cell anemia, walked onto his stepmother's crime scene with the gait of someone who already knew what he would find. Tracy stopped mid-sentence. Father and son locked eyes across the driveway. Neither spoke. The look held too long, carried too much weight. Not the desperate relief of family reuniting in crisis, but something colder, more calculated. William's face showed no shock at the police lights, no horror at the crime scene tape, no questions about what had happened to the woman who'd raised him. Kuhlman watched the exchange. Two men staring at each other in perfect silence while one woman's blood stained the ground between them. Tracy turned back to the camera, found his voice again, continued explaining how he'd been a good husband, a faithful pastor, a man who would never, could never do something like this. But William stayed where he was, watching, and the silence between them was louder than everything Tracy had just said. That silence between father and son carried the weight of 16 years. Joyce Bingham, Pauletta's sister and a longtime member of First New Mount Calvary, had invited Pauletta to the church after her second divorce, hoping she would finally find someone she could trust. It was 1994, and Pauletta was looking for something solid, a community, a fresh start, maybe a man who wouldn't leave. "I wanted to make sure she was all right. You know," Joyce would remember later. Pauletta met Tracy Bernard Burleson at First New Mount Calvary Baptist Church in the 5th Ward. He was attentive, stable, spoke the language of faith and family. They married in 1995. Joyce watched her sister settle into what looked like the life she'd been searching for. "I felt like my sister finally found someone she could trust." Joyce encouraged the couple to become foster parents. They did. Then came the charges Pauletta and Tracy Burleson accused of abusing a foster child with an extension cord and a wooden board. The woman who'd come to church seeking safety had become someone a child needed to be saved from. Both sides of Pauletta existed at once: hospice worker who cared for the dying, stepmother who made William kneel on rice in the driveway until he nearly fainted from the pain and the heat, victim of affairs and neglect, perpetrator of cruelty. The world insisted on sorting people into categories. Pauletta refused the sorting. In 2007, Tracy became pastor of First New Mount Calvary through his stepfather's influence. No congregation vote, just a transfer of power that bypassed the people who filled the pews every Sunday. Hurricane Ike hit in 2008. Grant money was announced for rebuilding. The church watched the money vanish while the Burlesons' lifestyle improved. New clothes, better car. The building stayed broken. How does a woman seeking safety become someone a child must escape? Church members began to talk, piecing together what they could see but couldn't prove. They weren't in it to help people, one said later. They were in it to get the check. Pauletta endured Tracy's affairs, his lies, his gradual transformation from attentive husband to unfaithful pastor living off the congregation's trust. She knew about the missing money. She knew where it went. She stayed anyway, trapped in the same pattern she'd fled from in her first two marriages, except this time, leaving meant exposing.
They weren't in it to help people. They weren't in it to help kids. They were in it to get the check.
The kneeling, the extension cord, the wooden board punishment delivered by a stepmother who had no biological claim to him but total control over his days. He was 27 years old with sickle cell anemia and nowhere to go. Then, in 2009, he found somewhere. William moved out to live with a woman from the hospital, someone who had shown him kindness, who worked in healthcare and understood his condition. Her name was Tyone Palmer. She offered him a room, a reprieve, a version of safety he'd never known in the Burleson house. It was the safest decision he would ever make. And it killed his stepmother. That connection between William and the woman from the hospital wouldn't become clear until investigators started breaking down every word Tracy had said. An investigator timed the drive from the corner store Tracy claimed to have visited back to the Burleson driveway. 6 minutes. Simple errand. Easy to verify. The kind of alibi an innocent man would give because it could be checked. So they checked it. The store closed at 9. Tracy said he'd been there at 9:30, buying snacks for Pauletta. Something sweet to bring home. The timeline didn't just fail, it collapsed. Whatever Tracy had been doing that night, it wasn't shopping at a closed convenience store. Kuhlman stood in the driveway while crime scene technicians processed Tracy's car, cataloging what was there and, more tellingly, what wasn't. They opened the doors, checked the seats, searched the floorboards for receipts, wrappers, bags, anything to support the snack run story. "No food," one of them called out. "No drinks. Nothing." No evidence of the errand Tracy had described in such vivid detail. No proof he'd gone anywhere except exactly where his wife had been shot. 2 contradictions. The store was closed. The car was empty. Tracy's alibi was built on air. Then a technician leaned into the driver's side and found the keys. They were sitting on the seat, still attached to Tracy's shirt. The shirt he'd wrapped them in. Fresh blood covered the fabric and the metal beneath. Pauletta's blood. Transferred from Tracy's hands to the keys he'd been holding when he touched her. The blood was still wet. "Keys are here inside the car," the technician said. Fresh blood. Kuhlman remembered Tracy's videotaped statement. The oddly specific detail volunteered without prompting. "After I got out, I never got back inside my vehicle." Why would a man need to establish that he never re-entered his car unless getting back in the car had been part of what he'd done? The keys proved it. To stage the scene to position the vehicle as if Pauletta had just pulled into the driveway. To create the illusion of a woman shot moments after arriving home, Tracy would have had to get back inside the car after touching her body. The blood on the keys said he'd done exactly that. His own statement said he hadn't. A trap he'd set for himself. Joyce Bingham arrived at the crime scene hours later, desperate to see her sister. Police tape blocked the driveway. Uniformed officers held the perimeter, keeping family back from the scene they needed preserved. She could see the outline on the ground where Pauletta had fallen, the dark stain the blood had left on concrete.
She was laying on that ground. They wouldn't let me see her.
Joyce already knew someone had killed Pauletta. Someone close enough to know when she'd be home. Close enough to position a car like a prop in the driveway. The keys were in the car. The man who said he never got back in the car had left his keys inside it, with his wife's blood still wet on them. It would be 3 weeks before the forensic analysis could confirm what Kuhlman already believed. 3 weeks before anyone could explain exactly how deep Tracy's lies went. The forensics would take 3 weeks. Before then, Tracy had a funeral to perform. Tracy Bernard Burleson's voice filled the rented hall, the hymn rising over 300 heads bowed in grief. Days had passed since the bloodied keys were discovered. First, New Mount Calvary Baptist Church had rented space for the service, and every seat was filled. The pastor stood at the front in a dark suit, singing for his wife, leading the congregation through their loss with the steady authority of a man accustomed to guiding people through their darkest hours. Kuhlman sat in the third row with his partner, Detective Hunter, watching every gesture. Tracy sang, preached briefly about moving forward, about the strength faith gives in impossible moments, greeted mourners in the receiving line with practiced warmth, accepting condolences, offering comfort to those who'd come to comfort him. The performance was flawless. Joyce Bingham sat alone in the back row. Tracy had barred her from family seating, Pauletta's own sister, relegated to the margins while the man under investigation held court at the front. She watched her brother-in-law perform grief with the skill of someone who'd spent a lifetime in front of congregations. The room saw a devoted pastor. Kuhlman saw 3 contradictions in an alibi and bloody keys wrapped in the man's shirt. Tracy moved through the service like he was conducting it, not enduring it. Shaking hands, nodding at the right moments. The grieving husband serving his congregation even in loss. Kuhlman thought about what he had. A closed store, an empty car, keys inside a vehicle Tracy swore he never re-entered, covered in blood that was still wet when technicians found them. Joyce's testimony about 16 years of corruption. Church members whispering about missing money. None of it enough for an arrest. Knowing and proving were different battles. Then Tracy opened the floor for family remarks. Kuhlman stood. The congregation expected condolences. Instead, Kuhlman walked down the aisle to the front, faced Tracy directly across 3 feet of space at the pulpit, and made a promise. He would find whoever killed Pauletta Burleson, no matter how long it took, no matter where the investigation led. The words hung in the air between them. A detective vowing justice while looking directly at the victim's husband. Tracy's composure.
I want y'all to know we will do everything that we can to get to the person that took Pauletta.
Started. It built like a wave through the rented hall. People rising from their seats. A standing ovation for the detective's dedication. For his promise to bring justice to their pastor's wife. 300 people on their feet, clapping, some wiping tears, grateful that someone with authority cared enough to make a public vow. Tracy stood at the pulpit, trapped in the moment. He couldn't walk away, couldn't object, couldn't do anything but stand there with his hands clapping mechanically, smile frozen in place, watching Kuhlman accept applause in the middle of Pauletta's memorial service. In Tracy's domain, his congregation, his church, his wife's funeral, the detective had seized control of the narrative and turned 300 witnesses into an audience for a promise aimed directly at the man they'd come to comfort. For the first time since the night Pauletta died, Tracy Bernard Burleson was not in control of the room. Tracy had lost control at the funeral. But he wasn't the only one performing. 3 days after the funeral, Tyrone Palmer walks into the Tyler Police Department interview room carrying a purse and a story. Tyrone Palmer, mid-40s, Tracy's former church secretary and rumored mistress, arrives at the police station dressed modestly, her face arranged in careful concern. She sits across from Coolman and Hunter, hands folded on the table between them. "I heard about Sister Pauletta on the news," she says. "Terrible thing." Coolman explains why she's here. William Fuller mentioned her name during preliminary questioning. They're talking to everyone connected to the Burlesons, trying to piece together what happened that night. Tyrone nods, understanding. She barely knows the Burlesons, she explains. Church acquaintances, nothing more. She's here because she wants to help. Because William mentioned her and she cares about that young man. William... She pauses, as if considering how to describe him. "I know him from church. Sweet boy. Always seemed troubled." The words come out smooth, measured, not rehearsed, just the natural rhythm of someone telling the truth. She talks about William's health struggles, his difficult relationship with his stepmother, how she'd tried to be a friend to him when he needed one. Coolman asks about the night Pauletta was killed. May 6th. Did she drive William anywhere that evening? Tyrone pauses thoughtfully, the way someone does when trying to remember details from weeks ago. May 6th. She shakes her head. "No, I was home. Watched TV. Went to bed early." She offers specifics. What show she watched. What time she turned in. The kind of detail
He was just pouring his heart out.
an innocent person would remember about an unremarkable night. Coolman presses gently. William said she drove him somewhere. Is it possible she forgot? If William said I drove him somewhere, he's confused, Tyrone says, voice soft with concern. Or scared. Coolman watches her hands. Steady. No fidgeting. No tells. She meets his eyes when she speaks. Doesn't look away. Doesn't shift in her seat. William Fuller had claimed this woman drove him to the scene. Sat in a car while he went to kill his stepmother. But the woman sitting across from Coolman now shows no sign of deception. No crack in her composure. Maybe William had lied. Maybe the stress of his stepmother's death, his father under suspicion. His own complicated history in that house. Maybe it had twisted his memory, made him point at someone who'd only tried to help. Tyrone leans forward slightly. I just want William to be okay, she says. He's like a son to me. Maternal concern. Genuine worry for a troubled young man. Hunter glances at Coolman. The detectives have no evidence to contradict her. No witnesses placing her car at the scene. No phone records linking her to the Burlesons that night. Nothing but William's word against hers. Coolman thanks her for coming in. Tyrone Palmer pushes through the station doors into late May sunlight. A free woman. Behind her. Coolman sits in the interview room staring at his notes. William Fuller claimed she drove him to the murder scene. She just denied it with the calm of someone telling the truth. One of them is lying. Without proof, the investigation had stalled. Then someone broke the silence. The Crime Stoppers recording lands on Detective Coolman's desk 3 weeks after Tyrone Palmer walked out of the station. A dispatcher drops the CD next to his coffee. Says it came in yesterday. Anonymous tip about the Burleson case. Coolman and Hunter load it into the computer. The CD spins. Static. Then breathing. Then a voice. Gender unclear. Nervous but deliberate. Someone who'd been carrying weight and finally decided to put it down. You need to look at the sun, the voice says. William Fuller. Kuhlman leans closer to the speaker. Tracy Burleson hired his own boy to kill his wife. Promised him insurance money. The call lasts 90 seconds. No name, no callback number. Just enough detail to make it real. The insurance policy, the conspiracy, the fact that Tracy had used his own son as the trigger man. Then the line goes dead. Kuhlman sits back. Hunter stares at the computer screen. 3 weeks ago. William had mentioned Tyrone Palmer. Tyrone had denied everything. The investigation had fractured into competing stories with no way to determine which version matched reality. Now someone had called in to say the son was the shooter and the father was the architect. Kuhlman rewinds, plays it again. Tracy Burleson hired his own boy. Hunter pulls the crime scene photos while the recording loops. Flips through images until he finds it. William Fuller's face in the crowd that night, standing at the edge of the driveway while police worked the scene. That vacant stare Kuhlman had noticed. The 1,000-yard look that hadn't quite fit the moment. The kid was there, Hunter says. We photographed him. Kuhlman looks at the image. William's expression blank, eyes fixed on the spot where his stepmother had bled out. Not shock. Not horror. Not the face of someone discovering violence. He wasn't grieving, Kuhlman says. He was checking his work. Kuhlman's funeral vow echoes back, find whoever killed Pauletta Burleson, no matter where it leads. And the answer just walked in on a Crime Stoppers line. Every piece suddenly has a place. Tracy's performance at the crime scene, the videotaped statement designed to establish innocence, William's silent arrival while his father was still talking. The look between them that lasted too long. Tyrone Palmer denying she drove William anywhere. Manufacturing maternal concern while lying about a murder she'd helped facilitate. 3 people. 1 conspiracy. Tracy orchestrating, William executing, Tyrone providing cover. Hunter ejects the CD, holds it up to the light. We need to find who made that call, he says. Kuhlman stares at the evidence board. Tracy's face pinned at the center. William's crime scene photo beside it. Tyrone's interview notes below. The closed corner store, the empty car. The bloody keys that proved Tracy had lied about getting back in the vehicle. And now this, an anonymous voice revealing the architecture of the whole conspiracy. Somewhere in Tyler, Texas. Someone knows what William Fuller did. Someone he trusted enough to confess to. Someone who carried the secret until guilt outweighed loyalty. The anonymous caller just handed Kuhlman the conspiracy's structure. Now he has to find them. Kuhlman found the caller within hours. The friend agreed to help. In the police recording room, the tape spools turn as William Fuller's phone rings for the 3rd time. Kuhlman and Hunter watch through glass. William's friend sits at the table. Phone pursed to his ear, hands shaking despite the rehearsal. The line clicks. Hey, man, the friend says. It's me. We need to talk. About what? William's voice through the speakers, cautious. The friend asks if he's okay. Heard about the pastor's wife. Wanted to check in. William's breathing fills the line. Long silence. Then his voice breaks. I can't do this anymore, he says. I keep seeing her face. Kuhlman leans forward. Hunter's pen hovers. The friend stays quiet, letting the confession breathe. I shot her, William says. My dad's wife. I killed her. The words hang in the recording room. Kuhlman and Hunter exchange a glance. I can't sleep. William continues. Every time I close my eyes, I see her sitting there. The blood. He stops. The tape keeps rolling. Before he explains exactly how it happened, drop a quick comment. Do you think his details will match what Kuhlman found at the scene? Or will they contradict just A or B, and one reason? What follows includes some recreated dialogue for narrative impact, but the confession itself is documented fact. The friend asks how it happened. William talks faster now, words pouring out. Dad never went to the store, he says. He stayed there, started arguing with her in the driveway. She was sitting in that lawn chair. Kuhlman remembers the folding chair near the body. I came up behind her while they were arguing. Dad kept her distracted. She never saw me coming. Hunter's pen stops moving. Everything William says matches the scene, the chair, the positioning, the approach from behind. Then Dad staged it. William continues. Moved the car. Made it look like she'd just gotten home. Called 911. Dad said we'd split the insurance, he says. Said she deserved it for what she did to me. Kuhlman thinks about the years of abuse that loaded William like a weapon. Tyone gave me the gun, William says. She knew the whole time, drove me there, picked me up after. Every piece slots into place. Tracy orchestrating, William executing, Tyone facilitating. The insurance motive, the staged scene, the lies unraveling. The call runs another minute. William explains the plan, the timing, how his father convinced him this was justice. Then it ends. The tape spools turn in silence. Kuhlman has it all. Tracy Bernard Burleson hired his son to murder his wife for insurance money. The pastor, the mistress, and the shooter all named. All documented, all headed for arrest. The confession was on tape. Now Kuhlman needed to connect it to the physical evidence. 2 hours after William's confession, Kuhlman spreads Tracy's original statement across the evidence room table next to the bag containing the bloody keys. Hunter stands beside him, holding the transcript of William's recorded call. Kuhlman reads Tracy's version aloud. Went to the store for snacks, drove home. Found Pauletta in the car, still breathing. Called 911. Tried to help her. Never got back inside the vehicle after discovering her body. Tracy said he found her in the car, Kuhlman says. Never touched it after that. Hunter reads from the transcript. William says Tracy moved the car after the shooting. He says, staged it to look like she'd just pulled into the driveway. 2 versions of the same scene. Tracy's carefully constructed alibi, William's raw confession. One of them had to be true. Hunter picks up the evidence bag. Tracy's keys inside, still wrapped in the shirt he'd used to hide them. Pauletta's blood covers the fabric and the metal beneath. Dark stains visible through the clear plastic. He touched her, Hunter says. Got her blood on the keys. Kuhlman stares at the bag. If Tracy's statement was true, if he'd found Pauletta already shot, called for help, stayed outside the car the whole time then, how did his keys end up inside the vehicle, covered in her blood? The answer clicks into place. To stage the scene, Tracy would have had to position the car as if Pauletta had just arrived home. To do that, he would have needed to get back inside the vehicle. And if he got back in the car after shooting her, after touching her body, his keys would have transferred her blood to the interior, then drove the car to stage the scene, Kuhlman says. His own statement proves he lied. For 3 weeks those keys sat in this evidence room, bloody and waiting. Now they're speaking Tracy Bernard Burleson's guilt louder than William's confession ever could. Kuhlman lays out the full architecture of the conspiracy. William confessed to pulling the trigger. Stood behind his stepmother while Tracy kept her distracted. Fired the shot that killed her. Tyone Palmer provided the gun. Drove William to the scene. Picked him up afterward. Lied to investigators with the composure of someone who'd practiced the denial. Tracy masterminded it all. Stayed at the crime scene. Argued with Pauletta to keep her in position. Watched his son shoot his wife. Then staged the car to create an alibi. Wrapped the bloody keys in his shirt. Called 911. And performed grief for the cameras. The keys prove every word of it. We have them all, Kuhlman says. The shooter, the supplier, and the pastor who hired his own son. Hunter starts drafting the arrest warrants while Kuhlman arranges the evidence one more time. Tracy's statement. William's confession. The bloody keys that contradict everything Tracy claimed. Tracy Bernard Burleson orchestrated his wife's murder and left his fingerprints literally all over the staging. The warrants were ready. The arrests happened. Then the evidence kept coming. The arrests air on the evening news. And by morning, a hospital co-worker is calling the Tyler Police Department with evidence from Tyrone Palmer's locker. Kuhlman and Hunter meet her at the hospital within the hour. I saw her on the news, the co-worker says, walking them down the fluorescent hallway toward the locker room. Tyrone Palmer, I work with her. She explains what she remembered after seeing the arrest. Things Tyrone kept in her locker. Stories she told. Details that didn't add up until they appeared on television alongside murder charges. She kept a photograph, the co-worker says. Said he was her fiancé. She leads them into the locker room. Points to Tyrone's locker. The hospital hadn't cleared it yet. Inside, taped to the metal door. A photograph. Tracy Bernard Burleson stands with his arm around Tyrone Palmer. William Fuller beside them. All three posed together like a family portrait, smiling. Comfortable, the casual intimacy of people who belong to each other. Kuhlman stares at the image. She said they were getting married, the coworker continues. Told everyone Tracy was her fiancé. They were planning a wedding. Said William was like her son. The coworker hesitates. She said his wife was in the way.
Tyon, I don't care, whatever will get the job done.
Claiming she barely knew the pastor couple, only cared about William's well-being. And now he's staring at a photograph of her posed with Tracy like they're already married. Every word she'd spoken in that interview was a lie. Not just about driving William to the scene, about everything. The distance she'd claimed, the casual church acquaintance relationship, the maternal concern for a troubled young man. She wasn't helping William. She was playing house with his father while they planned to kill his stepmother. I didn't think anything of it until I saw the news, the coworker says. Then she pulls out her phone. She texted me asking about guns, she says, scrolling through old messages. I thought it was weird. She finds the thread, hands the phone to Kuhlman. Text messages from April 2010. 6 weeks before Pauletta's murder. Tyrone asking if anyone knew where to buy a gun. The coworker asking what kind she needed. Tyrone's response, whatever would get the job done. Kuhlman photographs the screen. 6 weeks of premeditation documented in a text message thread. Not a crime of passion. Not a spontaneous act. A calculated conspiracy, planned far enough in advance that Tyrone was sourcing weapons while Pauletta still went to work every day, caring for the elderly. Unaware her husband's mistress was shopping for the gun that would kill her. Whatever would get the job done, the coworker repeats. That's what she said. Kuhlman photographs the locker contents. The image of 3 people playing family. Hunter screenshots the text messages. Tyrone Palmer had sat across from Kuhlman and performed innocence with the skill of someone who'd practiced every line. The photograph shows the truth she'd hidden. The lies are documented now, and the evidence keeps piling higher. Tyrone's lies were documented. The evidence was complete. Now came the arrests. June 8, 2010, before sunrise. Detective Wayne Kuhlman stands outside Tracy Bernard Burleson's bedroom door with an arrest warrant and a promise to keep. Hunter and backup patrol officers wait behind him, silent in the pre-dawn darkness. The bedroom door opens. Tracy Bernard Burleson lies asleep in bed, peaceful, breathing steady. 33 days since his wife was shot in the driveway 20 feet from this room, and the pastor sleeps like an innocent man. No nightmares, no restless guilt. Just the deep rest of someone with nothing on his conscience. Tracy Burleson, Kuhlman says. Tyler police, don't move. Tracy wakes, sits up slowly, shows no surprise. No shock crosses his face when he sees the officers standing in his bedroom. No confusion about why they're here. He looks at Kuhlman the way someone might look at an expected visitor who arrived slightly early. Kuhlman reads the Miranda rights while Hunter moves around the bed with handcuffs. You're under arrest for the murder of Pauletta Burleson. Tracy doesn't ask why, doesn't deny it, doesn't proclaim innocence or demand to know what evidence they think they have. He lets Hunter secure the handcuffs without resistance. Calm as Sunday morning. I want my lawyer, he says. 3 words. The only 3 he'll say about the murder from this moment forward. Not tonight, not at trial, not during appeals. Tracy Bernard Burleson will never confess to orchestrating his wife's death. Never admit to staying at the scene while William pulled the trigger. Never acknowledge that he staged the car and wrapped bloody keys in his shirt. He'll let the evidence speak, and he'll stay silent. 300 people gave Tracy a standing ovation when Kuhlman promised to find Pauletta's killer. Now, in handcuffs in his own bedroom, the pastor doesn't even blink. Kuhlman walks Tracy out through the same driveway where Pauletta died. Dawn light creeps across the concrete, illuminating the spot where her blood had pooled weeks ago. The stain is gone now, washed away by rain and time, but the shape of what happened here remains captured in crime scene photos, documented in William's confession. Proven by the keys Tracy claimed he never used to re-enter the car. The promise made at the funeral is delivered. Find whoever killed her, no matter where it leads. The investigation led here, to the husband who sang hymns at her memorial, to the son who stood silent at the scene, to the mistress who lied with maternal concern. William Fuller is arrested separately that morning. Unlike his father, William keeps talking, filling in details, explaining the planning, describing how Tyona gave him the gun, how Tracy positioned him behind Pauletta, how the lawn chair sat exactly where William said it would be. Tracy Bernard Burleson walks through his driveway in handcuffs, past the spot where Pauletta's blood stained the concrete. He hired his son to pull the trigger, his mistress to supply the gun, all for insurance money and the wedding that will never happen. He says nothing. Tracy said nothing. William couldn't stop talking, while his father stays silent. William Fuller sits in the interrogation room and tells Detective Kuhlman about the tattoo on his neck, Tyrone Palmer's lips, positions where he sees them in every mirror. He tilts his head, shows the mark. Tyone's lips permanently inked just below his jawline. The kind of placement that isn't an accident. She told me it was love, William says. That we'd be a family. Kuhlman listens as William confesses what Tyrone never mentioned. She didn't just provide the gun. She slept with him. The woman Tracy called his fiancée. The woman who saved William from Pauletta's abuse, she slept with both father and son. I see her every time I look in the mirror. Tyrone Palmer played them both. Told Tracy they'd get married after Pauletta was gone. Told William they'd be a family. That he'd finally have the mother he deserved. Used sex to bind them. Gave each man a different version of the future she was selling. William's voice breaks when he explains how it happened. Dad asked me every week, he says. Kept saying we'd split the insurance, that Pauletta deserved it for what she did to me. I kept saying no for months. Tracy worked on his son, reminded him of the kneeling on rice, the extension cord, the wooden board. Built the justification until murder started to sound like justice. William refused every time. When Tyrone asked, he stops. I couldn't say no to her. The tattoo on William's neck isn't love. It's ownership. a brand marking him as Tyrone Palmer's weapon. Aimed at the woman who abused him and fired when the woman who saved him pulled the trigger. Tracy manipulated with money and freedom. Tyrone manipulated with something deeper. She gave William the feeling of being wanted. Months later, in court, the prosecutor reads Tyrone's statement to the jury. She claims William acted alone, says she barely knew the Burlesons, only wanted to help a sick young man, suggests Tracy is innocent, that William's confession is unreliable. William lunges from the defense table. "She's lying!" he screams. "She gave me the gun!" Bailiffs grab him before he reaches the prosecutor. William fights their grip, shouting Tyrone's name, screaming about the lies she's telling from jail through her lawyer. They drag him toward the doors in a chokehold. His voice echoes as they pull him through, still trying to make someone hear him, still trying to make them understand that she wasn't innocent, that she'd manipulated him, that the tattoo on his neck proves she owned him. Tracy Bernard Burleson sits at the defense table across the courtroom, watching his son dragged away for the murder he orchestrated. Face blank, expression neutral. The same calm he showed when arrested, when the evidence mounted, when William's confession played in court. The pastor who slept peacefully after his wife's death shows no emotion now. But the jury is watching everything. The bailiffs drag William past Tracy's defense table, his screams still echoing off the courtroom walls as the doors swing shut behind him. Tracy doesn't flinch, doesn't turn. His face remains a mask, the same blank expression he wore when police found bloody keys inside the Impala he claimed never to have opened. The same emptiness he displayed when his mother's body was cooling in the driveway while he performed grief for the cameras. But the jury isn't watching him anymore. They're watching the empty doorway where William disappeared, and in their eyes, something has already shifted. 3 weeks later, the jury files back into the courtroom. 12 faces that have heard William's confession, seen the bloody keys, learned about the twisted triangle. Now they deliver 3 verdicts. Guilty. Tracy Burleson, capital murder. The jury finds he masterminded his mother's death for $110,000 in insurance money, hiring his younger brother to pull the trigger while he established an alibi at the movie theater where security footage would place him nowhere near the crime. Guilty. William Burleson, murder. The jury finds he fired 3 shots into Pauletta's head on January 24, 2011, ending the life of the woman who raised him, even if every moment of that raising was documented cruelty. Guilty. Guilty. Tyrone Palmer, evidence tampering and murder. The jury finds she helped stage the scene, lied to investigators, and participated in the conspiracy her silence bought with Tracy's affection. Her complicity sealed with William's devotion. Her lies exposed by the photograph she posed for and the texts she sent. The verdicts arrive like falling dominoes, each one inevitable once the first tips. But verdicts aren't sentences. Guilt isn't punishment. What does justice measure, the crime or the conspirator? Tracy Burleson. Life without parole. The mastermind who never touched the gun, never entered the driveway, never saw his mother's blood. He receives the harshest sentence. The jury understood what Detective Kuhlman proved: the hand that fires isn't always the mind that kills. William Burleson. 20 years, the jury heard his confession, his detailed account of 3 shots fired. But they also heard what wasn't charged: 16 years of Pauletta burning his hands on the stove, beating him with extension cords, isolating him from the world. The sentence reflects both truths: he killed her and she destroyed him first. Tyrone Palmer, 10 years for evidence tampering, 7 for murder. Sentences to run concurrently, 17 years total. The woman who weaponized both brothers, who lied about her whereabouts, who helped stage a crime scene. She walks out youngest, her role minimized by prosecutors who needed her testimony more than her maximum sentence. Joyce Bingham sits in the gallery, watching her sister's killers learn their fates. Is this justice life for the man who planned it? 20 years for the abused son who fired it? 17 for the woman who weaponized both. She doesn't know, but Pauletta is still dead. And now 3 people will pay, even if the prices don't match. Here's what remains uncharged. 16 years of documented abuse. Pauletta's cruelty entered the record as context, mitigation, explanation, but never as crime. The verdicts are rendered. The sentences pronounced. 3 conspirators head to 3 prisons. But the jury never heard everything. There's another crime at the center of this story. One that was never proven. The first new Mount Calvary Baptist church fire that destroyed everything days before Pauletta Burleson died. Early May 2010. The church burned. Financial records, membership lists, donation logs. Everything Tracy Bernard Burleson maintained in his role as pastor gone in flames. The building's interior collapsed into itself. Heat so intense it melted metal filing cabinets into twisted sculptures. Church members whispered arson the moment they saw the blackened shell. They knew their pastor. They knew his books didn't balance. 8 months later, when William Fuller confessed to shooting Pauletta, he told investigators his father set the fire to hide embezzlement from the church. Prosecutors built their murder case on that motive. Tracy killed his wife to silence the one person who knew what he'd stolen and what he'd burned to cover it up. The $110,000 insurance policy was payment. The church fire was the reason. Keep the witness quiet, collect the money, start over. Simple plan. It almost worked. But motive isn't proof. Arson investigators arrived at the charred skeleton of First New Mount Calvary Baptist Church and found nothing conclusive. The fire had burned too hot. 2 complete walls blackened and buckling. Roof collapsed into the sanctuary. Every document reduced to ash and floating away on the wind. No accelerant traces survived the intensity. No witnesses placed Tracy near the building the night it burned. No financial records remained to show what might have been stolen, because the fire consumed the very evidence that could prove theft. The destruction was so thorough, it erased even evidence of itself. How do you prove a fire was arson when the fire destroyed all proof of arson? The investigators closed their file. Cause undetermined. If it was a crime, it was perfect. Years later, the burned church building still stands in Tyler, Texas. Walls charred and crumbling, roof gone. Windows empty, black rectangles open to the sky. On certain days, you can still smell the ghost of smoke in the wood. Ash worked so deep into the grain it became part of the structure. Tracy Bernard Burleson serves life without parole in a Texas prison for murdering his wife. The jury heard the motive. He killed Pauletta to keep her quiet about the fire, about the embezzlement, about the arson that erased his crimes. They convicted him of capital murder. They sentenced him to die in prison. Justice was served, but the fire itself remains officially unsolved. Arson unproven. Embezzlement, no records survived to support charges. Tracy Bernard Burleson is imprisoned for a cover-up of a crime that officially never happened. He murdered the witness, but got away with the original sin. The church fire that started everything remains undetermined. The first New Mount Calvary Baptist Church ruins stand empty. Blackened walls open to the Texas sky. A monument to the crime Tracy won't answer for. The murder is proven, sentenced, closed. The arson remains officially undetermined. Some fires burn evidence. This one burned truth itself. Years after the verdict, Joyce Bingham stands in Tyler's Fifth Ward and thinks about what her sister was looking for when she walked into First New Mount Calvary Baptist Church, someone to trust. Pauletta came seeking community, family, belonging. She found 3 people she believed in. Tracy Bernard Burleson, who married her and made her think she'd finally found partnership. William Fuller, the stepson she raised abused, yes, but still her son, still someone she believed would never turn. Tyrone Palmer, who she thought was a friend, another woman navigating Tyler's church world. All 3 conspired to kill her. The insurance money would go to Tracy. The wedding between William and Tyrone would happen after Pauletta was gone. The plan required her death, and all 3 agreed she should die. Trust, given completely, repaid with 3 bullets to the head. Joyce walks past the burned church ruins, still standing in pieces. The blackened walls lean inward. Roof collapsed into the sanctuary where her sister once sang hymns and believed she belonged. The congregation scattered after the fire, after the murder, after the arrests. First New Mount Calvary Baptist Church is a shell now. Windows empty, doors hanging open to weather and memory. She stops at the empty doorway and asks the question no verdict answered. Why, William, your own child? Tracy could have hired anyone, could have kept William out of it entirely. But he pulled his own child into murder, handed him the gun, made him the trigger man for a crime Tracy planned and profited from. The abuse William suffered 16 years of Pauletta's cruelty became the leverage Tracy used to turn his son into a killer. The church where Pauletta sought family became the crime scene's footnote burned for money. The woman who knew about it murdered, the building abandoned like trust itself. Some crimes get solved without being understood. Detective Hunter once explained the final irony to Joyce. Tracy staged the scene to look like Pauletta had just arrived home, car running, headlights on, keys in the ignition. But to stage that scene, he had to enter the vehicle after touching her body.
He got a life sentence. I mean, look what his wife got.
Tucked them inside the car where police would find them hours later. The bloody keys proved he touched the body, touched the car, staged the scene. Everything he told police, his shock, his grief, his claim he never opened the vehicle,
He says, why would you put your son involved in something like this?
collapsed when forensics tested those keys. Tracy Bernard Burleson planned a murder and forgot to wash his hands. 3 people went to prison. 1 church stands in ruins. 1 woman lies in the ground, killed by the husband, stepson, and friend she trusted. The bloody keys that trapped him sit in an evidence locker in Tyler. Texas proof that staging a lie always leaves traces. Her name was Pauletta Burleson. She was a victim of abuse who became an abuser. She was a woman seeking trust who gave it to the wrong people. She was imperfect, complicated, human, and she deserved better than the death they gave her. This is the story she got. Pauletta Burleson's story is one that demands we remember her as a person, not just a case. Real people live behind every true crime story. Complicated, flawed, human people who deserved better than the violence that ended their lives. Pauletta sought trust and found betrayal. She survived abuse and became an abuser herself. None of that complexity made her any less deserving of justice. And none of it justified what was done to her on January 24, 2011. This case teaches us that staged crime scenes always leave traces. The bloody keys Tracy Burleson forgot to wash became the evidence that contradicted every word of his alibi. It reminds us that conspiracies unravel when investigators refuse to accept the first story they're told. And it shows us that justice, while imperfect, can still be served, even when some crimes remain unpunished. If this story made you think, Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me bring more true crime stories to light. Drop a comment below and let me know, what moment in this case stood out to you the most? Was it the bloody keys, William's confession, or the church fire that was never proven? I read every comment, and your thoughts matter. Thank you for listening to Pauletta's story with respect and attention. This case is based on real events, real people, and public court records. Some scenes have been dramatized for storytelling purposes, but the core facts, the murder, the conspiracy, the evidence, and the verdicts remain true to what happened. My deepest respect goes to Pauletta Burleson's family and loved ones.